Staff Sergeant Marcus Reed adjusted his scope for the third time in 10 minutes, though the target hadn't moved. The Cytherian patrol maintained their arrogant formation 2 kilometers downrange, their crimson armor gleaming in the harsh sunlight of Proxima 7. They moved like they owned the planet, which technically they did. For now. The rocky outcropping where Marcus lay concealed offered perfect overwatch of the valley below. His ghillie suit, modified with adaptive camouflage fibers, rendered him nearly invisible against the reddish stone. The Barrett M107A2 beneath him had been his companion through 12 deployments, and today it would speak again in the only language the Cytherian Empire seemed to understand. "Overlord, this is Ghost 7, Marcus whispered into his throat mic. "I have visual on the patrol, 8 hostiles, standard formation." The response crackled through his earpiece. "Ghost 7, Overlord. Mission parameters unchanged. Observe and report. Do not engage unless directly threatened." Marcus grimaced. 3 months since the Cytherians had arrived in human space, claiming divine mandate over lesser species. 3 months of watching them systematically dismantle human colonies while the brass tried diplomacy. The aliens stood 3 meters tall, their technology centuries ahead of anything humanity possessed, and their attitude made it clear they viewed humans as nothing more than particularly clever insects. Through his scope, Marcus watched the patrol leader gesture dismissively at the human settlement below. The Cytherian's translator unit broadcast his words across the valley in accented English. "Witness how the primitives cower in their crude shelters. Their resistance is as pathetic as their technology." The alien subordinates chittered in what passed for Cytherian laughter. Marcus had heard that sound before, during the massacre at New Geneva. His finger tightened on the trigger, muscle memory calculating wind speed and bullet drop automatically. 1 shot, center mass. The patrol leader would drop before he heard the sound. "Ghost 7, the voice in his ear reminded him. "Observe only." Marcus forced his finger away from the trigger. The mission was intelligence gathering, not revenge. Command needed to understand Cytherian patrol patterns, their communication protocols, their weaknesses. If humanity was going to survive this war, they needed every advantage they could get. The patrol moved through the settlement like tourists at a zoo. They poked at abandoned vehicles with the casual curiosity of children examining insects. One Cytherian lifted a human motorcycle with one hand, turning it over before tossing it aside with a metallic crash that echoed across the valley. "Fascinating," the patrol leader announced. "The humans achieved limited combustion-based locomotion. Primitive, but showing basic tool use capabilities." Marcus bit back a curse. His brother had owned a bike just like that one. Had, past tense, because Jake Reed was among the defenders who died when the Cytherians took New Geneva. The aliens had broadcast the entire battle as a demonstration of human futility. Jake had held a checkpoint for 6 hours against impossible odds before a Cytherian war strider finally brought down the building he was defending. The translator crackled again as another alien spoke. "Should we eliminate the remaining human presence in this sector, Commander Vexhigh?" The patrol leader, apparently Vexhigh, made a dismissive gesture with his 4-fingered hand. "Unnecessary. They pose no threat to the Empire's expansion. Let them scurry about in their holes. When the harvest ships arrive, we will collect what specimens we require for the labor camps." Labor camps. Marcus's blood ran cold. Intelligence suggested the Cytherians had been enslaving populations across dozens of star systems, working conquered species to death in massive industrial facilities. The aliens called it optimal resource utilization. "Ghost 7, be advised, Cytherian reinforcements approaching from the north. Heavy transport, estimate 20 additional hostiles." Marcus shifted his scope toward the northern approach. A massive hover transport crested the ridge, its anti-gravity generators humming with barely contained power. The vehicle was the size of a city bus, but moved with the grace of a hummingbird. 20 Cytherian soldiers disembarked, their equipment far more advanced than the patrol weapons Marcus had observed before. These weren't regular troops. The newcomers wore midnight black armor inscribed with golden symbols, and their weapons crackled with energy fields that bent light around their barrels. Elite units, the kind that had broken human battle lines on 6 different worlds. Observe and report, Marcus reminded himself, but his hands were already checking his equipment. The rifle was loaded with armor-piercing rounds, each one capable of punching through a meter of steel. His sidearm carried high explosive shells designed specifically for Cytherian physiology. The tactical vest held enough ammunition for a sustained engagement, plus the emergency beacon that would call in a nuclear strike on his position if things went completely sideways. The new arrivals spread out with military precision, establishing a perimeter around the settlement. Their leader, distinguished by elaborate golden markings on his armor, approached Commander Vexhai. Even at 2 kilometers, Marcus could see the patrol leader's body language shift from casual arrogance to rigid attention. Field Commander Zetharos, Vexhai's translator announced, "I was not informed of your arrival in this sector." The elite commander's response carried the weight of absolute authority. Intelligence Division detected unusual energy signatures in this region. Preliminary analysis suggests possible human military presence. Marcus went very still. Somehow they had detected something. His equipment was supposed to be undetectable by Cytherian sensors, but their technology evolved rapidly. What had worked last month might be useless today. Impossible, Vexhai replied. Human military forces were eliminated in the initial conquest. Only civilian populations remain, and they lack the capability to threaten imperial operations. Nevertheless, Zetharos said, we will conduct a thorough sweep. Deploy sensor drones to grid pattern 77. If humans are foolish enough to maintain military operations in imperial space, they will learn the price of such arrogance. Marcus watched the elite soldiers begin unpacking sophisticated scanning equipment. The devices looked like metallic spiders, each one the size of a briefcase, with sensor arrays that glowed with malevolent blue light. When they activated, Marcus felt a subtle vibration in his bones, as if the air itself was being examined at the molecular level. His position was good, but not perfect. The adaptive camouflage would defeat visual detection and most basic sensors, but these looked like military-grade scanning systems, the kind that could detect heartbeats from 3 kilometers away or identify human DNA from atmospheric samples. Go 7, Overlord. New orders. Remain in position and continue observation. Intel priority has shifted to maximum. We need everything you can gather on those scanning systems. Marcus almost laughed. Remain in position while alien death spiders hunted for human life signs. Of course, that was the order. Command was 300 light-years away, safe in their bunkers on Earth, while he lay on a rock waiting to be discovered by the most technologically advanced military force in known space. The first sensor drone launched with a sound like ripping silk. It moved in a perfect grid pattern, systematically examining every square meter of the valley floor. The second drone headed toward the eastern ridgeline, where Marcus knew at least 3 other human observation posts were hidden. The third drone angled directly toward his position. Through his scope, Marcus could see Commander Zetharos watching the scanning operation with predatory patience. The alien's posture radiated confidence, the absolute certainty of a being whose species had conquered dozens of worlds through technological superiority and ruthless efficiency. Field Commander, one of the technicians reported, Drone 3 is detecting trace organic compounds consistent with human presence. Grid reference 447 Alpha. That was Marcus's position, give or take 50 meters. The drone was closing fast, its sensors painting everything within a kilometer radius with invisible energy. In 30 seconds, maybe less, it would have his exact location. After that, the Cytherians would deploy their heavy weapons and turn his hiding spot into a crater. Overlord, Go 7, I am compromised. Request immediate extraction. Negative, Ghost 7. Extraction assets are not available. Continue mission. Marcus closed his eyes for a moment, thinking of Jake. His brother had faced the same impossible choice on New Geneva: abandon the mission or die trying to complete it. Jake had chosen to stay. The footage of his last stand had become required viewing at every human military academy, not because it was a victory, but because it proved something important about the human spirit. The sensor drone was 200 meters away now, its scanners painting Marcus's position with increasing precision. He could see Catherian soldiers beginning to orient toward his general area, their weapons charging with lethal energy. In 15 seconds, they would know exactly where he was. Marcus made his decision. He shifted the rifle slightly, lining up a shot on the approaching drone. Not to destroy it, that would only confirm human presence, but to damage its sensors just enough to create confusion. A ricochet off the rocks, maybe, something that could be explained by natural phenomena. Through his scope, he watched Commander Zetheros raise a hand, apparently receiving a communication through his armor's integrated systems. The alien's posture changed, becoming even more rigid. Whatever message he was receiving, it was important. All units, Zetheros announced, his translator broadcasting across the valley. Priority override from Imperial Command. Human resistance has been detected in the Kepler 442 system. All available forces are to redeploy immediately for pacification operations. Marcus held his breath as the sensor drones began returning to their operators. The scanning operation ceased as abruptly as it had begun. Within minutes, the Catherian forces were loading back into their transports, abandoning their search for human military presence. Overlord Ghost 7. Hostile forces are withdrawing. Maintain position for continued observation? Affirmative, Ghost 7. New intelligence indicates major Catherian fleet movement. Your position provides critical overwatch for tracking their logistics patterns. As the alien transports disappeared over the northern ridge, Marcus allowed himself a small smile. The Catherians were powerful, technologically superior, and ruthlessly efficient. But they were also overconfident, and that overconfidence created opportunities. He settled back into position, adjusting his scope for long-term observation. The settlement below remained empty. Its human inhabitants long since evacuated or killed. But their sacrifice wasn't meaningless if it provided intelligence that might save other colonies. Hours passed in silence. Marcus monitored his sector, tracking the occasional Catherian patrol and documenting their movements. The aliens maintained their casual arrogance, treating human space like a conquered territory where no real threats could exist. As the local sun began to set, casting long shadows across the valley, Marcus received new orders. A Catherian command post had been established 50 kilometers to the east, and command needed detailed reconnaissance on their defensive positions. It would mean a week-long movement through hostile territory, with no support and no backup. Marcus checked his equipment one more time, ensuring everything was secure for the long journey ahead. The Barrett would have to stay behind, too heavy for extended movement, but his sidearm and the portable sensor package would give him everything he needed for the mission. Before leaving his position, Marcus took one last look through his scope at the empty settlement below. Somewhere in that ghost town, human families had lived and worked and dreamed of a future among the stars. The Catherians had taken that future away with casual brutality, reducing human achievement to nothing more than primitive tool use capabilities. But the aliens had made one crucial mistake. They assumed that technological superiority meant inevitable victory. They forgot that humans had survived ice ages and plagues and wars by adapting, by refusing to surrender no matter how hopeless the situation appeared. Marcus Reed rose from his position and melted into the shadows, beginning the long journey toward the Catherian command post. Behind him, the empty settlement stood as a monument to human loss. Ahead lay the opportunity to gather intelligence that might turn the tide of an impossible war. The Catherians could keep their technological advantages and their arrogant assumptions. Marcus had something better, the absolute refusal to quit, no matter what the odds. It was the most human trait of all, and the one thing the aliens couldn't understand or defeat. In the distance, Catherian ships moved across the alien sky like falling stars, carrying their message of conquest to new worlds. But in the shadows below, a single human soldier moved with deadly purpose, carrying a different message entirely. The war was far from over. The Catherian command post sprawled across the plateau like a metallic cancer, its towers and defensive barriers rising from the red soil of Proxima 7. Marcus Reed studied the facility through his field glasses, counting guard positions and mapping patrol routes from his concealed position 3 kilometers away. 5 days of careful movement through hostile territory had brought him to this moment, and what he saw made his blood run cold. The installation was massive, easily 10 times larger than intelligence estimates had suggested. Hundreds of Catherian soldiers moved between buildings that hummed with barely contained energy. Weapon emplacements covered every approach, their barrels tracking in precise patterns that spoke of automated targeting systems. At the center of it all, a command spire stretched toward the sky, its surface covered in symbols that pulsed with alien meaning. "Overlord, Ghost 7, Marcus whispered into his throat mic. "Eyes on target. Facility is significantly larger than estimated. Count approximately 400 hostiles, multiple defensive layers, heavy weapon systems." The response was immediate. "Ghost 7, Overlord. Confirmed. New intelligence indicates this is Regional Command Center for Sector 7. Priority target for future operations. Continue reconnaissance and report defensive capabilities." Marcus shifted position slightly, using the natural cover of the rocky outcropping to maintain concealment while gathering detailed intelligence. His modified tactical scope recorded everything: guard rotations, vehicle movements, communication patterns. Each piece of information might save human lives when the inevitable counterattack came. Through his scope, Marcus watched a group of Catherian officers emerge from the command spire. Their armor bore the elaborate markings of high rank, and their movements suggested intense discussion about something important. The tallest of them, wearing armor decorated with silver and gold geometric patterns, gestured toward a holographic display that materialized in the air between them. Marcus activated his audio enhancement system, hoping to capture fragments of their conversation. The technology was human-made, inferior to Catherian equipment, but sometimes inferior technology was harder to detect than sophisticated systems. "Reports from the Kepler system confirm human resistance is more organized than initial assessment suggested," one of the officers was saying. "3 of our forward bases have reported coordination between human units." The tall officer, clearly the commanding presence, made a dismissive gesture. "Irrelevant. Human military capabilities are negligible compared to Imperial forces. Their resistance merely prolongs their suffering." "Nevertheless, Lord Commander Kethvar," another officer continued, "field intelligence suggests they have adapted certain guerrilla tactics that are proving inconvenient." Marcus felt a grim satisfaction at that word. Inconvenient. Human resistance fighters had been striking Catherian supply lines and communication nodes for weeks, always staying one step ahead of retaliation. It wasn't enough to win the war, but it was enough to hurt the aliens, and sometimes hurt was all you had. "Show me these so-called tactics," Kethvar commanded. The holographic display shifted, showing tactical diagrams that made Marcus's stomach clench. The Catherians had been studying human resistance operations, analyzing every raid and ambush with scientific precision. They were learning, adapting their own strategies to counter human guerrilla warfare. "Observe," one of the tactical officers explained. The humans employ hit-and-run strategies, striking targets of opportunity before withdrawing to prepared positions. They lack the strength for direct confrontation, so they attempt to inflict damage through surprise and superior knowledge of local terrain. Kethvar studied the display with the focused attention of a predator. Primitive, but occasionally effective. What countermeasures are being implemented? Enhanced patrol frequencies in all sectors. Sensor networks upgraded to detect human movement signatures. Retaliation protocols activated for any settlement suspected of harboring resistance elements. Marcus closed his eyes briefly. Retaliation protocols meant civilian deaths, innocent people paying the price for military operations they had no part in. It was the Kitherian way. Collective punishment designed to break the spirit of conquered populations. Excellent, Kethvar said. Ensure all field commanders understand that human resistance is to be met with overwhelming force. Make examples that will discourage further insurgency. The group began to disperse, but Kethvar remained by the holographic display, studying the tactical information with intense focus. Marcus could see the alien's face clearly through his scope, noting the predatory intelligence in those large, dark eyes. This wasn't some casual occupation force commander. This was a strategic mind, someone who understood warfare at a fundamental level. "Ghost 7, a new voice crackled through Marcus's earpiece. "This is Colonel Harrison, Intel Division. We're receiving your transmissions. That display contains operational intelligence on multiple human resistance cells. We need that data." Marcus studied the command spire, calculating distances and angles. The holographic projector was approximately 800 meters from his position, well within effective range for his rifle. But it was also in the center of a heavily defended position, surrounded by automated defense systems and hundreds of Kitherian soldiers. "Overlord Ghost 7. Target is heavily defended. Successful acquisition would require direct assault on fortified position. Survival probability minimal." "Ghost 7, Colonel Harrison." "Understood. Maintain observation and await further instructions. Do not compromise your position." But even as Marcus acknowledged the order, he was studying the facility's defensive layout with professional interest. The Kitherians had made their installation impressive, but impressive wasn't always the same as effective. The aliens relied heavily on technology, assuming their superior equipment would deter any serious assault. They had sensor fields and automated weapons, but they also had predictable patterns and overconfident positioning. As the day wore on, Marcus documented everything he observed. Guard rotations followed precise schedules, never varying by more than a few minutes. Patrol routes covered the same paths repeatedly, never adapting to changing conditions. The defensive systems were powerful but static, designed to repel conventional attacks rather than adapt to evolving threats. It was the same technological arrogance Marcus had observed in smaller Kitherian units. They had weapons that could level mountains and sensors that could detect a heartbeat from orbit, but they thought like engineers rather than soldiers. Everything followed predetermined patterns, operating within expected parameters. Humans, by contrast, specialized in operating outside expected parameters. As the alien sun reached its zenith, Marcus noticed increased activity around the command spire. More officers arriving, additional security details, technical staff carrying equipment he didn't recognize. Something important was happening, something that required the attention of senior Imperial leadership. Through his audio enhancement system, Marcus caught fragments of conversation as the officers gathered. Fleet deployment confirmation. Resource allocation for next phase. Human population centers identified for harvest operations. Harvest operations. Marcus had heard that phrase before, in intelligence briefings about Kitherian activities in conquered systems. It meant the systematic processing of human populations for slave labor, the final stage of imperial conquest. If they were planning harvest operations for human space, it meant the war was moving into its terminal phase. Overlord, Ghost 7. Cytherian Leadership Conference in progress. Detecting references to harvest operations and fleet deployments. Request priority analysis of all transmissions. Ghost 7 Overlord. Confirmed. Intelligence analysts are monitoring your feed. Continue observation. Marcus settled in for an extended surveillance mission, adjusting his position for maximum comfort while maintaining line of sight to the command spire. Professional patience was a sniper's most important skill, the ability to wait hours or even days for the perfect moment to accomplish the mission. But as he watched the Cytherian officers continue their discussions, Marcus began to notice something troubling. The aliens weren't just planning military operations. They were discussing human populations like resources to be managed, calculating the optimal number of workers needed for various industrial facilities, debating the nutritional requirements for different human age groups. The adolescent specimens show the highest adaptation rates to industrial environments, one officer was reporting. Recommend prioritizing capture of humans aged 12 to 18 for primary labor assignments. Marcus's finger tightened unconsciously on his rifle's trigger guard. Children. They were talking about enslaving human children for industrial labor. The professional detachment that kept snipers sane in impossible situations began to crack under the weight of that casual cruelty. Adult males demonstrate sufficient physical capability for heavy construction projects, another officer continued. However, they show higher resistance to conditioning protocols. Recommend enhanced compliance measures for this demographic. Enhanced compliance measures. Marcus had read the intelligence reports about Cytherian slave labor facilities. Enhanced compliance meant surgical modification of the human nervous system, turning free people into biological robots incapable of disobedience. Lord Commander Kethvar listened to these reports with the same attention he might give to discussions of equipment maintenance. To him, humans weren't people with thoughts and dreams and families. They were resources to be optimized, problems to be solved, obstacles to be removed. What of the military personnel? Kethvar asked. Can they be repurposed for labor operations? The tactical officer who answered wore armor marked with symbols Marcus didn't recognize. Negative, Lord Commander. Military specimens show unacceptable resistance to conditioning protocols. Recommend immediate termination upon capture. Immediate termination. Marcus thought of the thousands of human soldiers still fighting across a dozen worlds, men and women who had sworn to protect their families and their freedoms. The Cytherians were planning to execute them all, simply because they couldn't be turned into compliant slaves. Acceptable, Kethvar decided. Issue orders to all field commanders. Military resistance is to be eliminated with extreme prejudice. No prisoners, no exceptions. The gathered officers acknowledged the order with the casual efficiency of bureaucrats processing paperwork. They were sentencing an entire military to death, and it meant no more to them than scheduling a supply delivery. Marcus forced himself to remain calm, to continue recording the intelligence that might someday save human lives. But inside, he was calculating ranges and wind speeds, thinking about the Barrett rifle he'd left behind, and wondering if one perfect shot could disrupt their entire command structure. Human resistance in the outer colonies has shown unexpected persistence, another officer reported. Recommend accelerated timeline for harvest operations. Complete population processing within 6 standard cycles. 6 cycles. Marcus wasn't sure how that translated to human timescales, but it sounded like weeks rather than months. The Cytherians were moving to the end game, planning to finish their conquest of human space before resistance could become truly organized. Agreed, Kethvar said. Issue deployment orders to Harvest Fleet 7. Begin operations in the Sol system within 4 cycles. The Sol system. Earth. Marcus's blood went cold. They were planning to attack humanity's home system, to harvest the billions of people who lived on Earth and its colonies. It wasn't just about conquering human space anymore. It was about ending human existence as a free species. Overlord Ghost 7, Marcus whispered urgently. Priority flash traffic. Catherian forces planning assault on Sol system within 4 cycles. Harvest operations for entire human population. Request immediate strategic response. The response took longer than usual, probably because his transmission was being routed through multiple command levels. When it came, the voice was different. Someone senior, someone with the authority to make decisions that affected the entire war. Ghost 7. This is General Morrison. Confirm your intelligence. The Catherians are planning to attack Earth? Confirmed, General. Lord Commander Kethvar issued deployment orders to Harvest Fleet 7. Timeline is 4 cycles. Purpose is population processing for slave labor. There was a long silence on the channel. Marcus could imagine the chaos his report was causing at command levels, the desperate scrambling to deploy defensive forces around humanity's most important system. Ghost 7, General Morrison's voice finally returned. New mission parameters. Your position has maximum intelligence value. Maintain observation and report all tactical developments. Support assets are being deployed, but they will not reach your sector for 72 hours minimum. 72 hours. Marcus would have to remain in position for 3 more days. Watching the aliens plan the destruction of his species while waiting for backup that might never arrive. It was the kind of mission that separated professionals from amateurs, the kind of impossible task that defined a soldier's true character. As the alien day turned to evening, the Catherian officers concluded their conference and returned to their various duties. Lord Commander Kethvar remained at the holographic display, studying tactical information with the focused intensity of a chess master planning his next move. Marcus settled into his hiding place for the long night ahead, knowing that somewhere in space, massive alien fleets were preparing to end human freedom forever. All he could do was watch and wait and report, gathering the intelligence that might give humanity one last chance to survive. But as he watched the aliens move through their fortress with casual confidence, Marcus began to notice something they had missed. For all their technological superiority and strategic planning, the Catherians had made one fundamental error in their assessment of human capabilities. They thought they understood everything there was to know about their enemy. The ambush came at dawn on Marcus Reed's 3rd day of observation. He had been tracking a routine supply convoy when the lead Catherian vehicle suddenly stopped, its commander emerging to study the surrounding terrain with suspicious intensity. Marcus held perfectly still, knowing that even the smallest movement could compromise his position, but somehow the alien's gaze swept directly toward his hiding place. "Scan pattern 779, the Catherian officer commanded. "I am detecting anomalous readings in grid reference 417. Marcus watched in grim fascination as sensor drones launched from hidden compartments in the alien vehicles. These weren't the standard reconnaissance units he had observed before. These were hunter-killers, designed specifically to track and eliminate concealed enemies. Their movements were too precise, too focused. They knew exactly where to look. "Overlord Ghost 7. I am compromised. Multiple hunter drones converging on my position. Estimate 60 seconds to contact." The response was immediate but unhelpful. "Ghost 7, maintain position. Intelligence priority remains maximum. Do not compromise mission." Marcus almost laughed at the impossibility of it. Maintain position while alien death machines closed in for the kill. It was the kind of order that looked reasonable from a command bunker but ignored the reality of combat. In 60 seconds, maybe less, his position would be vaporized by Catherian weapons designed to punch through starship armor. But as Marcus prepared to abandon his observation post, he noticed something that made him pause. The convoy hadn't called for backup. The officer was conducting the sweep with only his immediate unit, apparently confident that standard patrol strength was sufficient to deal with any human threat. It was the same arrogance Marcus had observed throughout his mission. The Catherians consistently underestimated human capabilities, treating every engagement as a foregone conclusion. They had superior technology and overwhelming numbers, so they never considered the possibility that a single human soldier might pose a genuine threat. Marcus made a decision that would have horrified his instructors at sniper school. Instead of withdrawing to avoid contact, he adjusted his rifle and began selecting targets. If the Catherians wanted to find him, he would make sure they regretted it. The first drone died in a flash of sparks and twisted metal, Marcus's armor-piercing round destroying its central processor before it could transmit his exact location. The second drone lasted 3 seconds longer, just enough time to register the attack before Marcus's follow-up shot reduced it to smoking debris. The Catherian patrol froze in confusion. Their sensor readings indicated a human presence, but the destruction of their drones suggested capabilities far beyond what Imperial intelligence had assessed for human military forces. The patrol leader activated his translator, broadcasting his confusion across the valley. Human presence confirmed. Hostile demonstrates advanced targeting capabilities. Recommend immediate withdrawal and request for heavy support units. But even as the words left the alien's translator, Marcus was shifting position, using the broken terrain to mask his movement while maintaining line of sight to the convoy. The Catherians were scanning for a stationary sniper, assuming their enemy would remain in place like a conventional marksman. They weren't prepared for someone who treated the entire landscape as a weapon system. Marcus's third shot took out the convoy's communication array, silencing their calls for backup. His fourth shot punctured the fuel cell of their lead vehicle, creating a spectacular explosion that sent the remaining Catherians scrambling for cover behind inadequate rocks and twisted metal. "Impossible!" the patrol leader transmitted, his translator carrying notes of genuine fear. "Single human unit is engaging full patrol strength. Request immediate tactical analysis." Marcus could have ended the engagement right then. He had clear shots on every alien in the convoy, and his remaining ammunition was more than sufficient to eliminate the entire patrol. But something the alien had said triggered a memory, a fragment of conversation from the command post that suggested a different approach. Instead of continuing his attack, Marcus activated his own translator system and broadcast a message toward the alien positions. "Catherian Patrol, this is Staff Sergeant Marcus Reed, Human Military Forces. I have questions for your commander." The response was immediate and predictable. Human military personnel are designated for immediate termination upon contact. Surrender now, and death will be efficient. "That's what I thought you'd say," Marcus replied. "But before you try to kill me, I want to ask you something. You've conquered dozens of worlds, enslaved hundreds of species. You've got technology that makes our best equipment look like stone tools. You've got fleets that can crack planets and weapons that can sterilize solar systems." Marcus paused, letting his words register on whatever recording systems the aliens were undoubtedly using. When he continued, his voice carried the weight of absolute conviction. "So tell me, Commander, if you're so superior, if your empire is so mighty, if humans are nothing but primitive insects, why are you here?" The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus could see the Catherian soldiers exchanging glances, their body language suggesting confusion. Their commander remained hidden behind the wreckage of the convoy, apparently struggling to formulate a response to such a simple question. "Clarify your inquiry, human," the alien finally transmitted. Marcus settled his rifle more comfortably, knowing he had touched something important. "It's simple. You claim humans are beneath your notice, technologically primitive, militarily insignificant. Your own intelligence assessments describe us as lacking the capability to threaten Imperial operations. So why dedicate resources to conquering us? Why deploy entire fleets to destroy something that poses no threat?" The patrol leader's response was immediate but defensive. "Human space contains resources required for Imperial expansion. Your conquest is a matter of efficiency, not necessity. Resources, Marcus laughed, the sound carrying clearly across the valley. Commander, your technology can synthesize any element you need. Your ships can harvest entire asteroid belts. You can build whatever you require without ever setting foot on a human world. Try again. Another pause, longer this time. Marcus could imagine the alien commander consulting his tactical manuals, searching for protocol guidance that didn't exist. The question he was being asked wasn't covered in imperial doctrine because it challenged the fundamental assumptions on which that doctrine was based. Human military resistance requires pacification before harvest operations can proceed efficiently, the commander finally answered. Now, we're getting somewhere, Marcus said. Military resistance, from a species you claim is militarily insignificant. Resistance that's been inconvenient enough to delay your timeline for 6 months. Resistance that's forced you to deploy elite units and modify your tactical procedures. Marcus shifted position again, maintaining his advantage while pressing his point. You know what I think, Commander? I think you're terrified of us. The response was immediate and furious. The Catherian Empire fears nothing. Your species will be extinct within cycles. Then why are you still fighting us? Marcus asked quietly. If we're so primitive, so helpless, why haven't you already won? Your fleets outnumber ours 1,000 to 1. Your technology is centuries ahead of ours. Your soldiers are bigger, stronger, better equipped. By every rational measure, humanity should have been conquered in days, not months. The alien commander fell silent, and Marcus could see other members of the patrol turning toward their leader with something that looked like doubt in their body language. I'll tell you why, Marcus continued. Because somewhere in your perfect imperial planning, you made a mistake. You assessed our technology, our numbers, our weapons. You calculated our industrial capacity and our population centers. You analyzed our military doctrine and our strategic resources, but you never asked the right question. What question? The commander's translator carried a note of genuine curiosity, as if, despite himself, he needed to know the answer. Marcus took careful aim at the commander's position, knowing that his next words would either end the conversation or change it forever. You never asked what humans do when there's no hope left. The shot that followed wasn't aimed at the commander. Instead, Marcus put a round through the power core of the patrol's last functioning vehicle, cutting off their only means of escape and sending a clear message. This conversation was going to continue until he decided it was finished. "What are you doing?" the commander demanded, his translator now carrying notes of genuine alarm. "Teaching," Marcus replied. "You see, Commander, your empire has always fought species that surrendered when the odds became impossible. That's rational behavior from a survival standpoint. When defeat is inevitable, surrender preserves at least some of the population for future generations." Marcus could see movement among the alien positions, soldiers repositioning for what they clearly expected to be a final assault. He let them move, confident that his superior knowledge of the terrain would prevent any effective counterattack. "But humans," Marcus continued, "we have this interesting quirk. When there's no hope left, when the odds are impossible, when any rational species would surrender, that's when we become most dangerous." "Explain," the commander demanded. "My brother died at New Geneva," Marcus said, his voice carrying across the valley with absolute clarity. 6 hours. He held a checkpoint against your best troops. He knew he was going to die. He knew his position couldn't be held. He knew that reinforcements weren't coming. But he stayed anyway, because that's what humans do. Marcus paused, letting the weight of those words register. Your intelligence files are full of similar incidents. Human soldiers fighting to the last round, then fighting with knives and clubs and bare hands. Human civilians refusing to evacuate even when orbital bombardment was imminent. Human commanders ordering kamikaze attacks against your capital ships. "Irrational behavior," the commander protested. Tactical suicide accomplishes nothing. Does it? Marcus asked. Then why are you still here 6 months later fighting the same war? Why have 3 of your forward bases reported coordination between human units? Why are your own officers recommending enhanced compliance measures because standard conditioning protocols don't work on humans? The silence that followed was different from the previous pauses. This wasn't confusion or tactical consideration. This was the sound of certainty cracking, of assumptions being challenged by uncomfortable facts. You want to know the truth, Commander? Marcus said finally. You're not fighting a primitive species. You're fighting something you've never encountered before. You're fighting a species that gets more dangerous the closer it comes to extinction. Marcus could see the alien commander rising from cover, his translator active, but transmitting only silence. The other patrol members were looking toward their leader, waiting for orders that weren't coming. Every human you kill makes the survivors fight harder, Marcus continued. Every colony you destroy creates more resistance cells. Every family you tear apart produces more soldiers who have nothing left to lose. You're trying to conquer a species that becomes stronger through suffering, and you have no idea how to process that. Impossible, the commander finally transmitted, but his voice lacked conviction. Is it? Marcus asked. Then explain New Geneva, explain Kepler Station, explain why a single human sniper has kept an entire Cytherian patrol pinned down for 20 minutes. Explain why your empire needs harvest fleets and pacification operations to defeat a species armed with projectile weapons and chemical rockets. The alien commander stepped fully into the open, his weapon lowered, his posture suggesting deep thought rather than immediate combat readiness. What are you suggesting, human? Marcus rose from his concealed position, his rifle trained on the commander, but his stance non-threatening. I'm suggesting that your empire has made the same mistake every other conqueror in human history has made. You've confused technological superiority with inevitable victory. The empire's victories are absolute, the commander protested, but his voice carried doubt now. Are they? Marcus asked. Because from where I'm standing, you look like an occupying force, not a conquering one. You control our cities, but not our people. You hold our territory, but not our spirit. And every day you stay here, every resource you spend trying to break us, makes you weaker and us stronger. Marcus could see the impact of his words in the alien's body language. The commander was processing information that didn't fit Imperial doctrine, trying to reconcile his observations with his training. What do you want, human? The commander asked finally. Nothing from you, Marcus replied. This conversation isn't for your benefit. It's for them. He gestured toward the other patrol members, all of whom had emerged from cover to listen to the exchange. Your soldiers are starting to wonder, aren't they? Starting to ask why the primitive humans keep finding new ways to hurt the Empire, starting to question whether this conquest is as inevitable as they've been told. Marcus could see the truth of his words in the alien's posture. The way they looked toward each other and their commander with expressions he couldn't read but could interpret. Here's what's going to happen, Marcus said quietly. You're going to return to your command post and report this engagement. You're going to tell them that a single human soldier held off an entire patrol while conducting a lesson in military philosophy. And your commanders are going to ask the same question I just asked you. What question? The commander asked. Marcus smiled grimly. If humans are so primitive, so helpless, so beneath imperial notice, why are you still here? The question hung in the air between them, challenging everything the Cytherians believed about their own superiority. Marcus could see the doubt spreading among the patrol members, the recognition that their enemy might be something different than their intelligence assessments suggested. You can try to kill me now, Marcus said conversationally. You probably will eventually, but the question will remain. And it will spread through your ranks like a virus, making your soldiers wonder if they're fighting a war they can actually win. The alien commander stood motionless for long moments, his weapon still lowered, his translator silent. Finally, he activated his communications system and transmitted a message that Marcus couldn't understand but recognized as significant by the reactions of the other soldiers. "We withdraw," the commander announced in English. "This engagement serves no tactical purpose." Marcus watched in amazement as the Catherian patrol began a methodical retreat, leaving their disabled vehicles behind and moving toward the horizon on foot. They weren't running. They weren't fleeing in panic. They were conducting a tactical withdrawal, as if they had accomplished their mission objective. As the aliens disappeared over the ridge, Marcus activated his communication system. "Overlord, Ghost 7. Hostile patrol has withdrawn. Continuing observation mission." "Ghost 7, confirm. Hostile withdrawal without achieving tactical objectives?" Marcus looked toward the empty valley where moments before he had faced impossible odds against a technologically superior enemy. The Catherians could have overwhelmed his position with concentrated fire. They could have called for backup and reduced the entire area to molten slag. Instead, they had listened to a question that challenged their fundamental assumptions about the war they were fighting. "Confirmed, Overlord. Enemy withdrew after extensive tactical discussion. Recommend intelligence analysis of all transmissions from this engagement." "Understood, Ghost 7. Continue mission." Marcus settled back into his observation position, but something fundamental had changed. The Catherians were no longer an unstoppable force of technological superiority. They were an occupying army with doubts, facing an enemy they didn't understand and couldn't predict. Somewhere in space, alien fleets were preparing for the final assault on human space. But down on the surface of a forgotten world, a single question was spreading through enemy ranks. A question that would make soldiers wonder and commanders doubt, and an empire reconsider its assumptions about inevitable victory. The war was far from over. But for the first time since the Catherians had arrived, Marcus Reed believed that humanity might actually have a chance to win it.